a memoirist, an author. He has written a book called Hounded by God, A Gay Man's Journey to Self-Acceptance, Love, and Relationship. What this is a compilation of selected journal entries that Joe has written over the course of over 40 years. This man was one dedicated journalist. He is absolutely articulate in these pages, and I consider him a mystic. I have a little secret to tell you all, Joe, before we get into the conversation. If you want to, I think I've mentioned this to you, but when Mary Ann asked me if I would interview Joe Gentilini on Queer Catholic Faith, I said, "Who is Joe Gentilini?" And she mentioned who you were and what you have done. And to be honest, begrudgingly, I went to your book and I read it because that's what an interviewer is supposed to do before he interviews a writer and an author. And I was blown away. I was really moved by the honesty, the sincerity, and the depth of your spirituality and the way you connect faith, your Christian faith, with your raw life experience. And so it's a pleasure to have you on board. Joe,
Thank
I
you.
understand your partner Leo is here.
He is.
Will you want to bring him in to say hello?
Sure. Yeah, there he is.
Hi, Leo. Welcome.
He can't hear you.
Yeah. I'm going to put up a slide or two of the two of you. So you both have aged very, very gracefully.
You're kind.
So, Joe, would you tell us a little bit about, I'm interested to know, when you were writing this journal, did you have an idea that someday you would publish it?
No. There is an entry in there where I talk about, I thought somebody would read it later on. I thought there would be some people that would read it, but I didn't think it was going to, that it would be, that it would be in a published form where actually it got broadcast or in that. I just thought, a few people will read it. I share some of my journals with some folks and with my spiritual director. She gets it. But I didn't think about publishing it until John McNeil, in the 90s. I had met him in the mid-70s, and I was somewhere in the late 80s. I think I started to send him my monthly journal, and he kept after me saying I should do something with them, and I didn't know what to do with them. But then he just pushed, and I prayed, and there it is.
And John McNeil, for some of you who may not know, is the Roman Catholic priest. He's still living and was monumental in sort of pushing the dignity and the rights of lesbian and gay people, and especially in the Catholic Church, because he wrote from the perspective and he spoke from the perspective of a Catholic priest. He was is today still a very courageous man, and Joe, I'm not surprised that he was an influence on you. So what struck me in the first portion of your book, and it's really presented well. Your editor did a marvelous job, I want to say. Who is your editor, so we can...
David Schimmel. David Schimmel.
David Schimmel. Yeah.
His address in some of the later editions of the book is on his the page where the introduction of the preface. I don't remember how he put it in there, but his website's there, and his email address is there.
Okay, great. You use the word vocation a lot in this book, in your journal entries, especially in describing your relationship with Leo. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by vocation?
When I was I was born in the late 40s. I grew up in the 50s. I went to Catholic schools. The only vocations that were honored were religious life and priesthood. And even in my second grade, I can remember the nun saying, those are the best. So I thought, well, but I didn't think I could do that. I couldn't get married. So I ultimately, I knew I had to get out of my life of promiscuity, and I prayed, and I made a connection with Leo, and I did just that was the way I was supposed to become holy. If I ever become holy, it's going to be as a gay man, and for now, as a gay man in relationship with Leo, and so that's my vocation.
And that realization took a long time, did it not? To really sink in?
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons it took a long time is it took a long time for me to accept my homosexuality and to integrate it, and to integrate it with my Catholic faith. Yeah. And so it took a long time for that. So, I'm a slow mover, I guess, I really knocked me on the head a hell of a lot.
Many of us are. Now, your parents were very devout Catholics, and they had a difficult time. They went through their own tremendous journey to finally accept you, and to accept and truly love Leo. But it struck me that even before they arrived to that place of acceptance, you were coming to terms with their limitations, with their lack of acceptance, and really you were wrestling with your acceptance of their their snail pace journey. How did it happen for you to sort of let go and accept them where they were?
Well, it wasn't a nice linear progression. I had many, my mother would say things. When I first told her that I was gay, my mother cried, and I never saw her cry the same way except when she said goodbye to my father in his coffin.
Oh.
But we couldn't let go. We couldn't let each other. We couldn't just go away from each other. My father, in many ways, was far more accepting than my mother, which surprised a lot of people. My mother was a German, and she was rigid, and she was very clear about what she believed, and she didn't know what to do with me. And it was by grace that it occurred, because my spiritual director knew all about me, and my mother, through an act of another nun's death, Sister Blessed called me up and said, "Mother wants you to go to your mother and tell her that Sister so-and-so has died, and we don't want her to read it in the paper because they had the same disease." And I went home to my mom, and I told her that, and so every Thursday at 7:30, my mother had a phone date with this nun. I was never allowed, obviously, to know the content, but my mother was changing, and the other part of that is that I prayed. I really prayed. I put the suffering that I went through and the pain of my mother and not accepting me, and I united it with the cross of Jesus, and I prayed for reconciliation. And through the efforts of this nun, my mother reconciled Christmas of 1987, which is about 6 years before she died. So, Leo, she invited Leo over. They did recipes together. My mother was trying to show him, the different German and Italian recipes that we liked, and it was really wonderful.
Yeah. this nun was an ally of yours, a friend of yours, who knew you were gay.
Yes,
And
she
was sort of the intermediary between you and your mother to help sort of reshape and soften her mind and heart.
I asked Sister after the reconciliation, I said, how did you do this?
Yeah.
And she said, Joe, she said, you never stopped loving your mother.
Yeah.
She could not deny that God was in your life.
Yeah.
And that's what I told her.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that is so beautiful, and it's still, even in this day and age where the LGBT crowd is more easily and quickly accepted by their peers. Young people are accepted more easily, but we need to remember that there are still a lot of kids out there who are living with shame and who are living in families who are not accepting, who are going to churches that are not accepting and are belligerent and ignorant. And so a lot of folks are still experiencing resistance from the people they love. And you offer in this series of selected journal entries this wonderful picture of how you came to simply let your parents be who they were and not go away and accept them as they were on the journey. And I think that has a lot to do with folks ultimately turning around and accepting us for who we are, is because we have given them the space to do that, to travel their own coming out. So I want to thank you for that. You mentioned that you were living the cross, and that came very clear. And I want to just mention to our attendees that Joe does this remarkable job of describing his raw life experience with the language of faith, using the symbols and the mysteries of our Christian faith, and applying them so beautifully to his raw experience. So if you want to read a beautiful intersection of the mysteries of faith and our own life experiences, this is a book to read. And it seemed as though you were living the mystery of the cross for many years as you struggled yourself to be self-accepting. And you were very honest in your journals about frequenting the gay baths. And you were also honest to say that some of those experiences taught you some things. So almost as if God was meeting you even there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Before Leo, I mean, my sexuality had been repressed for so long that when I finally came out, I came out with a vengeance, and I didn't want any restraints on my attitudes or behavior. And I was even denied communion by a Catholic priest here, and I demanded to see the bishop, which is another story that's not in the book. But I would go to the baths, and the baths were a place where at the beginning, it was safe to have sex in the bath. If it was so easy to get picked up, the gay bars, you get picked up, you arrested. If my boss found out, I would be fired. So the baths were a safe place, and I had a good time. And I didn't think a whole hell of a lot about whether God was in the bathhouse or not. Although, after a while, there was a dichotomy in me, because I would pray, and then I'd be going to the baths and being a little, and so I would pray about that. And when I was in my doctoral studies, one of the professors said, you swallow a lot of your anger, and it comes out in sex. And the experience of the baths changed from being a place where I could be mutual with someone and loving, at least limited intimacy,
Yeah.
to a place where I used people and I was selfish.
Yeah.
And then I knew God wasn't there. And that was
and Leo taught you to sort of embrace your gentler, tender side. Is that accurate?
I think that's probably accurate, yeah. There was a hardness in me. There was an anger. I mean, this was before the reconciliation with my mom and dad, and the church, was condemning, and I got denied communion in a Catholic church, and I was angry. And I let people know I was angry, and even in my anger, however, I was still praying. Except for one period, a year and a half, from 1978, the fall of 1978, to Advent of 1979, I left the church, and I actually would not pray. And I had an experience that led me back. So, and I can talk about that or not. That's part of that.
Please do. Say more about that.
I started to visit the Abbey of Gethsemane, which is a Trappist monastery in Kentucky. My first retreat was Memorial Day weekend of 1971, and I really loved it there. And as I got more angry at the church, however, I left. And this one monk who I had befriended in the monastery, or he had befriended me, would always wonder, why aren't you coming down to visit? And I didn't want to tell him, so I don't want to. So he did it enough times. I said, all right, I'll come, but I'm not praying. So I got down there, and the next morning I took a walk in the woods, and there's a section in the woods there where Jesus is kneeling down. It's in metal, the metal figures. Jesus is kneeling down with his hands covered over his eyes, and I was sitting in a chair there in front of him, and I started to say, in the words of Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is exactly how I felt. And about, I don't know, somewhere along the line, the words changed, and I started to say, my God, how have I forsaken you? And I started to cry, and I said, nope, don't want to do that. So I went back to the monastery, and there was one priest that I had talked to once before. He knew I was gay, and I asked to see him, and he said, Joe, God's got a handle on you, and he's not letting go. And he said, come back however you can come back. Whether you're on the outside, the inside, on the margins of the church, makes no difference if you're in the heart of Jesus. And I came back because of the Eucharist, and that's my drawing card. So,
I love how you allow yourself to sort of to answer some of your heartfelt questions in God's voice. I mean, it's your voice, but you sort of do some play acting in throughout the book, through your journal entries. You note how exactly you sort of took the voice of Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in other places, you're having this dialogue, this conversation with God, and you're hearing God's voice in your own voice, and it was a lovely touch. Did someone suggest that to you at one time, or did that practice just arise in you?
I don't remember anybody suggesting it to me. I became aware of it in the early 80s, but the other part of that, however, might be that in my doctoral studies in Gestalt therapy, there's a technique of the empty chair technique, where you put somebody of importance in the empty chair, and then you talk, and they answer back. So it could have come some of that, but I know that it started in the early '80s, and it didn't happen all the time, but it did on occasion, and it brought comfort to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you relate it beautifully in the journal entries. It's a great model for folks who are seeking new ways to pray and ways to encounter God. That was a real gift that I encountered. The whole book really is one constant prayer. I want to bring you to the present, to today. What does your relationship with God look like in 2014?
You know, when I was first dealing with myself, God seemed distant many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I was raised with a very judgmental God. I was born in the 40s, raised in the 50s, going to hell for everything or anything. And when I started to come back after my experience in the woods at the monastery,
Mm-hmm.
God began to take a different view for me, or I took a different view of God. And after I met Leo, that increased. That I came to experience that God loves me in spite of everything, with an incomprehensible love that I can't even imagine. They love that much. God seduced me through Leo.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
He played with me, and I bought. I got.
And that's another thing. The whole mystery of the incarnation is so evident. How you are able to articulate how God speaks to you. God works in your life through other people, and in a special and unique way through your partner Leo. And that's the incarnation. God is enfleshed in our human skin. And again, you know how to make those connections. You spent a good deal of your life speaking truth and love to power, mostly via letters to bishops and priests. Do you think your voice made a difference with any of those clerics that you communicated with?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the interactions with the bishops. The one bishop of Columbus, who's now deceased, is the one I called when I was denied communion by a priest. Now, I never met this bishop. I called the chancery. I said I wanted to talk with the bishop. They put me off. I kept calling back, and finally they said, all right, talk to the bishop. So I told the bishop that I had been denied communion because I was a gay Catholic, and I wanted to talk about it. So he said, all right. So he made an appointment. I came to the chancery. I'm waiting in the reception room. I'm looking at the pictures of the bishops and the Pope, and I'm thinking, what in the hell am I doing? But I went in to see the bishop, and he listened to me for an hour. I mean, he talked back to me. I mean, where's you don't talk about God's justice. You talk about only of His mercy, and we had a little conversation. So after that, I always wrote him, and he always wrote back. The next bishop, I started to write him, and he would write back, and he would tell me where he thought I was wrong, and I started to share some of my journal entries. Now, that bishop is retired, but he always answers my letters. He's always respectful, even now he writes his responses. The present bishop of Columbus, but the present bishop of Columbus doesn't even acknowledge that I sent him a letter. But I know that he reads what I send him because I've been told by others who know him and have been in his presence that he reads what I send and that he has said that they are spiritual and insightful. Yeah. So hopefully it makes a difference. I don't know. I've written bishops across the country, and I get responses from some, and I don't get any from others. One bishop took me to task. That's all right. I wrote him back. I'm respectful in my letters. I don't
Yeah.
ask them for anything. I just tell them my experience as a gay Catholic
Yeah.
and where I think the church could change.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time and effort to give witness, because I think a lot of Catholics feel as though that would be a waste of time, and if we don't do it, who will? And how are these guys going to hear the voice of the faithful otherwise? So I really want to
Jim,
thank you for your witness there.
I'm not responsible for the results. I'm
No.
only called to tell my story.
Yeah.
God, and I pray for the bishops.
Yeah. 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 We're gonna go to questions soon here. So I've noticed a couple already, but please, folks, type your questions. And Joe's an honest guy, and he's a transparent guy, and he'll take whatever you want to give him. So now's your chance. But I do have a question, and I think it was repeated in a question that's been asked in the text chat box already. Have you had people contact you who have found and read your book?
Yes, I have. Remarkably,
any interesting encounters?
One particular religious sister told me that she took it on her retreat last year, and it was one of the most spiritual books she had ever read in her life, and she thanked me for writing it. I've had several priests who have written to me through my editor if they couldn't find my email, and told me what it meant. There was a young man, a young adult man in another state who is dealing with coming out now, and I'm trying to help him integrate his spirituality and his sexuality, and I've had about 40 responses.
Wonderful.
Which very few I would ever call negative, and only that was so minor that it was,
Yeah. Yeah. Your witness reminds me of, again, the continuing need to put our voice out there, to make sure that young people, especially who are being either dragged to church by their parents or who go willingly, who are transgender or gay or lesbian or bisexual, who are asking questions, it's so important that they know that there's a Catholic voice out there, that there are people across the country who form a community called Dignity, who are there for them, who are preaching the gospel of love and inclusion and the gospel of incarnation. People, young and old, needs to hear our voice. And my concern is, are we using it well enough? Nationally and from our own chapters, are we reaching out? Are we, putting letters to the editor? Are we writing the bishops? Are we reaching out to Catholics in the pew somehow, some way, to let folks know that there's an authentic Catholic voice out there that is affirming of the wholeness and holiness of LGBT people and their families. And I thank you for your part, Joe, in that regard. So let's take some questions here. I'm seeing one from I think he's a friend of yours, Mark Matson. Is that correct?
That's
Mark
correct.
Is from Ohio. Yep. He asks the same question. You heard many people who have read your book and been changed by it. Can you tell us one such story? And that story of that young fellow who reached out to you and you're having this ongoing conversation with is wonderful. Barb from Tampa, as the mother of a gay young man, what can I do or say other than pray that might encourage my son as well as other young people to return to the Lord and to the church?
That's that's a very good question. I would say pray. Um,
Hmm.
there are a lot of I don't know exactly what the issue with the son, whether or not he doesn't believe anymore, or whether he's angry at the church because of its non-acceptance or what. But there are a lot of good books out there now about being gay and Catholic, gay and Christian, um, and she could just kind of have that available, or let him know that there are a lot of books there, and he could, where he could go. Give him Dignity USA's website. Go on it. Maybe that could encourage him. I mean,
Hmm.
we there are so many people who have been hurt by the church, and it's understandable why they're angry. It's understandable why they stay away. For me, I couldn't stay away because of the Eucharist. That was
Yeah.
the drawing card. It may be something else for someone else that draws. And like the Trappist monk said to me years ago, "Where are you with the heart of Jesus?" That's good. There's another story of another Trappist monk that might fit with this. Leo and I, it was 1985, we went to make a retreat at another Trappist monastery. And the abbot, who knew me, took us to the river, and he said, "Joe and Leo, what you are suffering today, what gay people suffer today with the discrimination and prejudice, is like the blood of the early martyrs, and it will bring about the change in the church.
Hmm.
It is coming. It will not happen in your lifetime, but it's
Hmm.
coming. So
Hmm.
love each other and love the world." And, it is coming. There are a lot of priests now that would give a whole different advice than this stuff that I got taught early on
Hmm.
in my life.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Right.
and for the mother, just let her just continue to love her son.
Hmm.
And, you know, he has to walk his own path. He has to arrive at it himself. But just continue to love him and support him and make sure that he knows that he's loved just as he is.
Hmm. Thank you. Um, Another question. What gives you the motivation to keep a hold onto your identity and faith when people tell you 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 uh, you can't be gay and Christian, or someone who questions the authenticity of your faith or your ministry? Um, what motivates you to kind of stay rooted and grounded?
I think that comes forth from my relationship with God. Um, I you know I tried to ignore on numerous occasions in my life the voice, and
Hmm.
and I it's part of my vocation. My vocation is not only as a gay Catholic in relationship to Leo, but as a gay Catholic in relationship to God.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be who I am before God and with Leo, and everything flows from that, from my
Hmm.
baptism, really. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
my baptism. Um, I'm a gay Christian,
Hmm.
and I have to live that. And when I screw up or I don't do it as well as I quote should, well, then I take notice and see what I can do about it. And my spiritual director has been very encouraging. She's 80-some-year-old nun living in a nursing home, but I'm going to see her tomorrow at 2:30. So we'll see what
Well, say hi to her from all of us
I will.
here on QCF,
I will.
and thank her for us as well. So,
I
Joe,
will.
I am going to ask you, because your face is I can hear you, and I think your audio is just fine. but you're frozen. Your visual is frozen to some of us. So I'm going to ask you just quickly if you could click onto that cam icon again as you had done before, and then click on it again and see if that unfreezes you, if that thaws you out here. Oh, so far so good. And you're getting some thanks from people, from Barb from Tampa, who asked the question about her son. She thanks you for your answer. Another question here. Joe, what role has dignity played in this journey of yours?
It's been an important part, but it has a period well, I'll tell you this way. I first heard about dignity from a priest that I went to see in 1974. I had been in therapy to change my orientation from 68, and in 74 I was suicidal, and I heard of dignity because John McNeil had written an article about the church and the homosexual in October of 73, and he mentioned this organization. So I wrote them, scared half out of my mind. Finally had enough courage to see if there was a priest I could talk to. There wasn't one that they knew of in Columbus. They gave me one in Dayton, Ohio. I was scared to call him. I finally called him, said, if I ever want to come talk to you about being gay, can I? He said yes. I said, thank you very much. Click. That was the end of that phone call. A couple months went by. I actually went to see him, and he told me a little bit more about dignity, and so I joined. And in about 1970, it was about 74, myself and 5 other men created a chapter in dignity in Columbus, Ohio.
So you were one of the founders?
Yeah, of here.
Okay.
Yeah, in Columbus. And then we had a really good, the bishop supported us at the time, and it worked. And then around 1978, my faith was changing. I was angry, and I was going to Athens, Ohio for my doctoral work, and Dignity, Columbus chapter just kind of died. And then I met Leo, and then Leo wanted to start one, and I was not too supportive because when the Columbus chapter had ended, there were bad feelings on a lot of people's parts. So anyhow, in the mid-90s, Leo said, I'm going to start a chapter. I said, well, my dear, if you're going to start it, I'll support you. So we started getting a couple of people together, and it started again, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. And these days, the chapter doesn't meet, right? But you're still on call to sort of be a prophetic witness when the moment calls for it, either through press releases or media releases, through media and other ways. Is that correct?
That's true. We did meet every other week or twice a month for liturgy, and we found that over a period of time, it didn't fulfill the needs of some people, and we were only getting the same people. It was a small group, so we decided to kind of end that, but not close the chapter. So our chapter meets once a month or once every other month for either liturgy or for a dinner or some sort of communication. We meet each other's homes. We pray together. Dignity here has aligned itself with other reform-minded organizations, like in Columbus, we have Call to Action. We have a really strong call to action. There's another organization that started up called Simply Catholic, where people meet. It's more integrated. So it's not just gay, but it's gay, straight, and our common wishes for a more progressive church.
Yeah.
And Dignity does, it writes letters, or I mean, we're known. I mean, it's not like we've disappeared.
Yeah.
Good.
Good. Yep. Yep. Roll with the changes. Another question here, Joe. As a Leatherman and as a member of the Dignity Defenders, can you comment on the role of leather and spirituality in the life of you and Leo?
I laugh a little bit. I chuckle when we talk about leather because I'm really leather and lace. And I really think that my interest in leather came about out of a sense of powerlessness, personal powerlessness. I wasn't in control. I was angry with the church for years. I wasn't in control, but I always liked leather. I mean, and this one time I was at a bar and I put on somebody's leather jacket, and it was like, oh my God, I just found a whole part of me that I didn't. And I know that it was a way for me to get in touch with my masculine power. And I'm aware that being my masculine power is not a power over somebody or against somebody, but it was a way for me to get in touch with the fact that I do have a voice and that I can speak it and I can use my anger in more appropriate ways. And so I still like leather. I love the smell of leather. I like being in the Defenders. And I don't know if I can explain my spirituality in leather any more than I just did.
I think you did a good job. Articulated that well. Thank you. Another question from Seth Jacobson in Philadelphia. What are your thoughts on Pope Francis and the perception that he is promoting greater inclusivity? Do you think he is moving the church in a positive direction?
Yes, I do. Now, Pope Francis hasn't changed any doctrine or teaching of the church, some of which, obviously, I still think are negative and limping.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
But the tone has definitely changed. When he gave that interview and said, "Who am I to judge gays?" That was really powerful. I joke that I think he ought to be having somebody test his food so that he's not poisoned. I even read an article today in the National Catholic Reporter that says, or else it was online, he's going to have a hard time trying to reform the Curia. But I give him A for effort, and I sent him a copy of my book. Don't know if he'll ever read it, but I sent him a copy.
You sent him. Oh, good for you.
Sent him a copy, and I gave him a letter, talked about my journey, and he got there hopefully. So I'm hopeful for the Pope. Yeah. My fear is that our expectations will be so high that he won't be able to satisfy them, and then people will just get disappointed, and there we go.
Excellent point. Go ahead.
I pray for the Pope, and what else? I'm not leaving, so they're gonna have to put up with me. So, move over, bishops. I'm here too.
Yeah. I let me add my 2 cents. I agree with you that I think, the other shoe will drop. It already has dropped. He's already mentioned that, he's echoed what others have said, that a child has a right to a mother and a father, and we all know that most children are, we understand the absolute goodness of a mother and a father, but we also know the absolute goodness of two men or two women raising a child in a home of love. And I agree with you that I think we may be hanging our hat a little too heavily on what the Pope might say or might not say, or what he has said or what he has not said. And at the end of the day, it is our baptismal call to give voice to our conscience and to give voice to our convictions and to stand up and for those who are marginalized, regardless of how friendly or how good our current Pope is. So we celebrate when the Pope lands on the side of the love of Jesus, but we continue to stand up ourselves and to make our voices heard. So that's my 2 cents.
My Catholicism does not depend upon what the Pope says or doesn't say. I mean, it's nice when he agrees with me, but when he doesn't, he doesn't. So
yeah. Amen. Any other questions out there? Yes, Mark, again, was there a single event that finally moved your mother over the threshold to have some compassion and understanding for you?
I don't know if it was one single event, but like I mentioned before, there was this nun who died and had the same disease that my mother had. And this nun, another nun called me to tell me to go home and tell my mother. And once the sister and my mother started to talk, my mother in time changed. And in 1987, Leo was invited to Christmas for the first time. And I had taken my mother Christmas shopping a month before, and we bypassed these doll babies. And my mother told me, probably 100th time about, she was one of 13 kids. She really wanted a doll baby. They were very poor, and she didn't get it. And so I went back and I bought the doll, and I wrapped it, and I told Leo, I said, you take a picture when Mom opens that package. And my mom lifted it up, and she looked at the baby, and she said, that's very nice, and she put it down, and I thought, well, that was a bust. So it was Saturday night. So on Monday, I called Sister, and I told her it was a bust. And she said, oh, no, it wasn't. She said, your mother called me up Saturday night and told me how wonderful it was that Leo was in your life and that he came to Christmas, and she knew how much it meant to you. And when she started to talk about the doll baby, your mother sobbed, and she said, you gave your mother her childhood. And that's when I said, Sister, how did you do that? And she said, I told your mother that what she was doing was not loving you, and that you had never withdrawn your love from her. And that changed. That was, and after that, Leah was invited to everything. So it's.
Yeah. This nun reminds me of the great intermediary, what some call the co-mediatrix. I certainly don't believe in that title, but Mary, the Mother of Jesus, who I think is the patroness for all mothers and fathers of kids who grow to understand themselves to be gay or lesbian or transgender, bisexual, or gender nonconforming. And I believe that Mary, the Mother of Jesus, stands next to these parents and is the intercessor to our God for these parents to be loving and accepting. I want to call everybody's attention again to this book that Joe has written, this compilation of selected journal entries, Hounded by God, One Man's Journey to Self-Acceptance, Love, and relationship. I'm going to put up the slide here to show you how you can purchase this book without my glasses. There you are. So go to Joe's website. Joe, the book is on sale through your website. Is that right?
It is. It is.
www.josephgentilini.com. And as a secondary option, you can go to Amazon, but I would encourage you to go first to Joe's website because, he deserves a little bit more. He deserves as much money as he deserves. So Amazon always takes a cut of that. So I would encourage you to go to Joe's website first and give that a shot. But this book is worth the read, and it really is a book worth giving to folks who are struggling to accept themselves. And to that point, Joe, I want to ask you: do you have plans to put this book online as an ebook? Because so many of our young people, are doing their reading digitally.
I know that it's available through Amazon as an ebook. And I don't.
It already is.
Yeah, it's already. Yeah, and I think you can get it also from the website as an ebook. I'm not absolutely positive. I know you can get it through Amazon as an ebook.
Okay. Wonderful.
And I make
all
very,
right.
very little money on that one. But
Say that
that's
again?
all right. I said I make very, very little money on that, on the ebooks, but that's all right.
I understand. Yep.
I don't, it's not that important really
Mm-hmm.
in the scheme of things. So.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for your presence with us tonight and your deep dedication to scribbling your thoughts and your prayers and your feelings and your emotions to paper all of these years, because they have become a gift to so many of us who have cracked open this book of journal entries. And I really do encourage those of you who are attending to pick up this book and to read it and to send it on to your loved ones. So Joe, thanks for that, and thanks for your continuing witness. I want to thank the Logan and Peggy for your wonderful behind-the-scenes work, and for all of you who have attended this evening. It's been great to have you. We will invite you back for Season 3, and we may even have a Queer Catholic Faith web show before that point. So stay tuned in. You'll be receiving notices and invitations because we have your email address, and so we'll keep you tuned in about what's coming to the future. But you can expect for QCF to show up on your computer screen or your Android or your iPad. So thank you again, and we hope to see you again. Joe,
thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. And folks, there are no surveys tonight, so we're letting you off the hook easy. So we will simply say good night. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great Easter. Bye-bye.
Bye.